Zion's Gate Ranch.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep, in Alton, Missouri.
In Alton, Missouri. And he would be a great source for your Gloucester Old Spot pigs. Do you sell wieners?
Yep.
Okay.
Wieners, feeders, registered breeders.
Wieners, feeders, and registered breeders. We're all about poetry.
Top quality pigs, though. They're great.
Yeah.
They're great pigs. So, you ever need them, just get a hold of us. We'll help you out.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Trolley hooks, the warming hooks for you. Meat hooks, you really apply pressure. And you're not going to damage the skin or the meat or anything. You're just going to get more hair off more efficiently. Even though you don't see guts, you are in gut town. Awesome.
We have this internal body fat of the pig. You can see all this right here, this light business.
Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm David here at Zion's Gate Ranch. Today we have a special video for you today. It's been 2 months or so since the Missouri Homesteading Expo. It's been a while. I've been trying to get the footage together. It was an amazing event. We were blessed to be able to provide the hog for Brandon the Meatsmith. Very talented guy, very knowledgeable guy in culinary skills and all that, and butchering skills. Just a wonderful person. And many others were there. Joel Salton. It was a packed out place. And guys, I recommend going next year. If you didn't get to go this year, go next year because you'll learn a lot. So anyways, we provided the hog. We have all the footage. Stay to the end of this video. You're going to learn so much, guys, and enjoy this video. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm David here with Zion's Gate Ranch. We are on our way to the Homesteading Expo in Marshfield, Missouri. We are so blessed to be providing a pig for the Meatsmith Brandon, and this is going to be an amazing event, amazing journey. So guys, come along for this ride. It's early in the morning and we're trying to watch for deer, and we got Bo in the trailer for the expo. It's just a blessing to be able to do this and be a part of a lot of other homesteaders, breeders, farmers, and all that stuff, guys. So come along for this event. You don't want to miss it. It's a lot of educational purposes, a lot of knowledge and skills we can learn from other people. So Meatsmith is gonna butcher him right on the trailer at the event in the tent. So here we go, guys. Enjoy this video. Come along. What are you thinking, Bo? Okay, everybody, we are in the truck and we are on our way to the expo. It is 5 in the morning and we are about an hour away. So we'll catch you guys when we're there. Sorry for my truck noise in the background. I have a diesel and you know how that is. It likes to boom, boom, boom. So anyhow, guys, we are going to be at the tent in an hour and getting everything ready.
We have a different tool to acquire our food. That is reason. We have a rational soul. So that means that all the food that we acquire will be treated with art, or should be treated with art, artfully. And so it should taste good. And that's part of the craft, that's part of the art. And I really, to this day, I've been doing this for 15 years or something like that. The final cause, the goal, the purpose of all of this is delicious, nutritive food for my family. That's the final cause. And it sounds simple, and that's because it is. But if that is your goal, if that's your final cause, then all the means that you will employ to get to that end will become more intelligible, more obvious, and simpler. So we're not slaughtering this pig today or butchering it tomorrow for the retail commercial deli case. We're doing it for the family table. And so happens that that is the thriftiest and the most extravagant way to harvest a pig. That's where all the flavor is. That's what all the fancy chefs are trying to get back to in their expensive restaurants is grandma's ham. And lo and behold, grandma's ham is the simplest. It's the easiest to make. It's the prowess of the home cook, not the chefs in the lab coats. And so this is a domestic art, thoroughly. This is an assertion of delight in the human scale. This humble feast, this modest feast on one well-raised pig. From your own emotional state, you feel a pig well, because you have to be able to take the shot right when it's available. You know, you could pull up and it's like 30 seconds, you have a perfect sight picture, pig is still, take a shot. Or take 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Take your time. Because if you take that 30 minutes to wait for the perfect opportunity and then you take that shot, that is nothing compared to how much time you will lose chasing a pig across the highway with a bullet in its head and super not dead. The time wasted is exponential. All of the fencing that you thought you had that was a barrier is totally nonsense to a pig that is fleeing. And you will find yourself with a bad shot chasing after your pig with your rifle, just wondering, like, how is this going to end? That was plan A through Z, right? So, all of that to say, take your time. Do not take any risks with the kill shot. Oh, you're a sweet buddy. Because second only to the shot, the kill, I would say the temperature of your water will decide whether or not you do this again. The temperature you're going for technically is 145 degrees Fahrenheit. So that is what will scald the pig, which means you want the water a few degrees over that before you get the pig in there. Because through thermal displacement, it will actually drop the temp just a little bit. And that kind of subtlety is decisive. Like you'll notice, you know, a perfect scald is real nice, and an imperfect scald is absolutely terrible. And so when I'm doing this, I have my thermometer, but then I also have my specially calibrated thermal displacement device, and I stir the barrel because it's warmer down here, or no, it's warmer up here than it is down there, and you get a more accurate reading of the temp. So I want it to be like 147, 148, somewhere in there. With 150 you'll be okay, but the key is not to leave it in too long. That's really how you prevent the overscalds. And when you get the perfect scald, you can scrape pretty hard. You're not going to bruise the meat, but you haven't overcooked the dermis, so it's still solid. So you can really apply pressure, and you're not going to damage the skin or the meat or anything. You're just going to get more hair off more efficiently. It's possible to also torch off the hair. And the advantage of torching is that you don't have to have such a high point to hang the pig from. You know, when I set this up without my crane, maybe for a class or somewhere remotely that I can't drive to, I need a barn branch or a barn beam or a tree branch that is 14 feet off the ground. And that leaves room for a chain hoist, the gambrel, and the fully elongated pig, and the barrel, and the burner. You need a lot of height. And most, front end loaders of small tractors don't have that elevation, that height. He can fix watches and play the fiddle. So he was a useful dude in the village and kill the pigs. And they count because he could kill the pigs in the most gentlemanly sort of way. And so what he would do, and this is before, they had firearms widely available. He would get into the pigs. These are backyard pigs. These are pigs that are like pets. They're part of the family. They get all the slop from the kitchen. The children feed them 2 or 3 times a day. All the swill from the kitchen. So I'm going to cut around the tip of the anus here. This is a male pig. If this were a female, I would include the vulva in this. Just since it's a male, there isn't one. And really, the anus is in the pelvic canal. So it's actually in a canal made by bone. Which is, if it's a female pig, that's where the piglets would come. And so, I'm just freeing the rectum from the walls of the pelvis. And, once you feel like you've gotten, maybe 4 inches deep, put your sharp knife down and get out your dull fingers. And then just go in and you can break some fascia, some connective tissue that's holding the rectum in there until you have kind of a free rectum that's protruding enough to be able to tie it off. And the more you free it up on this end, the easier it will be to pull it out to the front end. And the rule is always, when in doubt, get out your dull fingers and do it. This is a male pig, so I'm just going to score beneath the skin to get the pizzle out. There's the tip of the pizzle. And if the tip of the pizzle, which is the technical word by the way, it's not just one that my 8-year-old made up. If the tip of the pizzle looks like it's full of fluid, that's because it is. So give it a wide berth. That is the stinky pungent fluid. The bladder, the urine in the bladder, is actually no problem at all. So if you puncture the bladder, it's okay. It's basically sterile. You don't have to worry about it. I wouldn't even rinse it. It's really the key in this down here, which even just removing it, like I just did, you will smell it. This is where he adds the fragrant, attractive aroma to his urine. It's all in the tip. And because this urethra, which is probably not what it is, but this pizzle is constricted, you can cut it, and it's fine. You're not going to leak anything that you should leak. And then our bin. And then the way that I like to eviscerate a pig is to get the goodie tub below the trotters, so you can catch all the goodies. And it's helpful to notice that this is really where gut count starts, and this is where muscles are. So I can safely cut in between the hands, in between the muscles, straight down the pelvis. And my knife is stopped by the pelvis before it gets into gut town. And I'll even pull the pizzle back there. And now, as I go to open this, it's helpful to know that you are cutting through flesh that is the thickness of a slice of bacon, right? This is the belly. Unlike a deer where it's paper thin and you're in the guts immediately, right? This is actually quite thick. There's a little bit of forgiveness. And I like to cut it with just the tip of my knife. You're not going to be able to see it from back there, but I can tell the difference between internal body fat, which is where guts are, and subcutaneous body fat, which is out here. And it's separated by this light-colored membrane. It's really light color, and it's got more toughness to it. And you'll feel it grating on the tip of your knife. So if you just cut through that membrane, but no deeper, even though you don't see guts, you are in gut town. What you're seeing is internal body fat. These specialistic fats on pig. And I just go down to the sternum. Now, because I did this way, and I've only got internal body fat and kidney fat holding on to all the guts, holding them in there, I can reach gut town with my dull fingers, which I like, instead of my sharp knife. It's all just right there behind the fat. We've got large intestines, small intestines, bladder, got some pee in there. Everything is connected to the spine, and it all starts up here in the pelvis. So I pull out that part that I tied off, the anus. And then I'm going to bridge my finger and my thumb across the fascia that's holding all of the connective tissues. Fascia, these strigulus, is holding all of the digestive tubes and sacs to the spine. None of it's stuck to the side walls of the belly. It's all on the spine. So if you just bridge your finger across those stretchy business, the stretchy parts, and push down, you will liberate all of the guts from the inside. When I get to the parts of the renal tracts that are connected to the kidneys, I'll put them. And let everything fall out. We've got the stomach, the beautiful liver. Oh man. Yeah, that's lovely. So, this is what a healthy liver looks like. Good job. I like to pull off the bile sac. It's edible. It is super gross. Very bitter. The essence of bitterness. It's beautiful. It's a homogeneous color, no spots. If you see little white spots in the liver, that's the presence of roundworm, which is also not a big deal. Anything that lives outside is going to have some degree of roundworm parasite, but if you tolerate it, that's a beautiful liver. The thing about liver, and all offal, that's what all this is. And literally, offal etymologically means that which falls off. So it's all the stuff that falls off. The offal is objectively delicious. If we don't like it, it's because there's a problem with its provenance. The cheat code for all the offal is freshness. Fresh liver is like a different substance entirely from previously frozen liver, or liver that's been hanging out in a refrigerator for too long. So this goes with the spleen, the kidneys, all of these offal textured meats. Right now, they are more delicious than they will ever be. And about 2 minutes ago, they were even more delicious. The freshness is the secret. It's totally the secret. This is the spleen connected to the caul fat. This is a membrane of fat. It's folded over on itself several times. It's actually quite large. But this wraps around all the guts of the pig, totally neutral and mild in flavor. You wrap this around things and bake them in the oven. That's what this is for. So all the things. You can wrap all the sausage and bake them in the oven and call them crepignettes. You can wrap a chicken in it, wrap a leg of lamb. Very delicious. The caul fat. And you only get that when you harvest your own pig. I've never even seen that available for purchase. Alright, so in the name of time, I'm going to get in here. All of this has use. And it's only the limitations of time that prevents us from literally turning every inch of intestine into food. All the stomach, everything. The lungs. It is all edible if you know how to cook it, and it's all very simple.
You got 5 minutes, Ryan.
Because I can't help myself, we'll harvest the heart, and then we'll harvest the hanger steak, and then I'm going to split this pig. This is part of the diaphragm. The hanger steak and the skirt steaks are part of the diaphragm. They are the butcher's ration traditionally. Because they're very little. They are the most flavorful. And it's part of the tradition of not muzzling the ox. It only treads out the grain. You know that Old Testament principle? You don't muzzle the butcher when he treads out the ox either. So he would take the skirts and the hangers. Alright, beautiful. Now I'm going to split this pig with a handsaw. This is a bone saw. It is designed for the sawing of bone. It's well worth it. You can get a stainless blade for a sawzall, which will make quicker work of this. And it works great. It still takes a little skill though, because the sawzall is not a fixed blade, it tends to wobble. And so it's really easy for it to get off track. And if it gets off track, you're no longer splitting the pig down the center, and you're starting to cut into the loins. They're right there along the spine, where the pork chops are. What we call back straps on a deer. Those are right on either side of my saw right now. And I'm just trying to navigate right between them, so I don't take any chunks out of the precious fast track point. But this saw is awesome. It's worth spending a little more for the better quality items, especially when it comes to hand tools and butchery. I get this saw from BundleTV.com. We're BundleTV.com. Nice layers of backside on this guy. Beautiful. Awesome. There you go. Not only contaminant to be what we have introduced by losing our handle. Beautiful. So that's what a traditional pig looks like. You want to see a lot of this white stuff on this.
We do this a lot. We harvest pigs, these exact pigs actually, Gloucester Old Spots, on our farm in northeastern Oklahoma. We're just outside Tulsa. And we are Farmstead Meatsmith. Farmsteadmeatsmith.com is our website. And that's where we post a lot of our classes. So we do this from beginning to end, the full story, from living pig all the way to the slaughter, the cutting, the curing, sausage making, blood sausage, everything in a 3-day course. And we really try to equip people to be able to do this at home. So it's not a glorified demo class. It's only 8 people, it's really small, and I put knives in everybody's hands. And as complete noobs, we do it. And we do it excellently well. And that's because this is actually a simple process. This is not a complicated thing. It only becomes complicated when you try to slaughter 5,000 pigs in a day. That is recklessly complex. This is simple. This is a narrative that you can fit in your brain. And I would even say that if you learn how to raise a pig well, and then how to kill it well, then everything that comes after that is super simplified. It becomes effortlessly delicious. Because at the end, it's really important to know why we do this. Why go through all that extra work, scalding and scraping like we did yesterday? What is the point? And it's very simple. We do this so that we can eat well. That's it. The thing about butchery is that the thing is not about butchery, it's about cooking. This serves the family kitchen. That's the goal. And if you have that goal in mind, then you are the best authority and the best equipped to do everything before the cooking, to raise the pig, to kill it, to cut it, to cure it. Because you have that goal, such that for my own pigs, if I would rather have a good home cook kill and cut my pigs than an experienced, grocery store butcher. Because she has the clear end in view, which is that this should taste well, and we're not going to waste anything. And so it's going to sound, I'm going to hopefully not simplify this to a ridiculous extent, but it might be that because really I'm only thinking about 3 things when I come to cut up a pig. I'm not thinking about, this is where the flat iron steak comes from, this is where the top round is and the bottom round. I'm thinking about, how can I make this delicious? And there is only 3 answers to that question when it comes to meat, and that is braising, pan frying, and roasting. If it sounds oversimplified, that's because it is, but it's also true. There are only 3 recipes for cooking meat of any creature, and it's braising, pan frying, and roasting. And yes, we can include barbecue in there. That's because you can braise, pan fry, and roast on a barbecue. You're just using primitive fuel, wood fuel, right, for that beautiful flavor. But it's still braising, pan frying, and roasting. So the most important thing that you can learn when it comes to pork butchery is how to braise, pan fry, and roast. Because you're going to cut this creature to fit your pot for braising, your pan for frying, and your oven for roasting. That's the whole paradigm. We could just end it right here. That's all I know about butchery, is how to braise, pan fry, and roast. And so I got to carve this 4-legged beast to fit the pot, the pan, and the oven. And just so we're kind of on the same page, braising happens in the pot. And it is the application of moist heat. So there's water, or beer, or wine, or milk, or a mixture, or whatever, liquid in a pot with a tough piece of meat in there, some vegetables that smell nice, and a lid. And you let it simmer, low and slow. And that's what you do usually with tougher cuts. And then we all know what pan frying is. That's just direct heat, right on the pan, hot and fast. Usually a quick cooking method for meat that is tender. And then you've got the roast, which can be low and slow or hot and fast. And that's the application of dry heat in the oven. And how you know what to braise, pan fry, or roast is a very simple equation. You just need to know what's tough or tender on the 4-legged beast. And you know what is tough or tender if you just imagine the way that your dog moves when he walks around, because he's also a 4-legged beast. What muscles is he using frequently? All the time. You know, all the leg muscles, the hip muscles, the shoulder muscles. Those get constant use. They are therefore tough. They need to be braised. Or they could be roasted low and slow to have enough fat on them that melts and then braises the tough meat in its own fat. I hope you're still not thinking of your dog right now. Shift back to pig. And then you can deduce, simply by the use of that muscle in the living animal, how it ought to be cooked. If it's tough, it needs to be braised, or slow roasted if it's got enough fat, right? And that's how I'm going to break down this whole pig. We're also going to break it down with a view to curing. And we have a gorgeous example of that here. So this is the pig that I killed 2 years ago, right over there, the first time I came to the expo, and we started this on the salt on the second day. This was an old spot pig, just like this one, a little smaller. And so we're going to start this. This has many names. You know, this is ham in American English. It's jamon in Spain. It's jambon in French. It's speck in some Germanic parts of Italy. It's got all different names, but the thing about it that it is preserved. It's cured, but not merely flavored. It's preserved, which means it will never spoil. It will keep until the end of the cosmos, or it is in ambient temperatures in your house. That's what this is. That's what ham is. That's what preserved meat is. So we're going to talk about that and get that started today. So if I don't start cutting, we are not going to finish this. So the first step is before we get into quartering, because we're going to quarter this side of pork just like I would quarter a deer or a moose or an elk or a cow or a camel or any 4-legged beast. I would quarter it this way. And because that's how we're going to separate it into braisers, pan fryers, and roasters. That's what the quartering does. Before we get there, though, the pig has a few fruits that we need to lift off of the carcass that are frequently thrown away, which is very sad. So inside, I wish I had a camera so you guys could see this, but we have this internal body fat of the pig. You can see all this right here, this white business. This is frequently regarded reprehensibly as waste. And so you will, when I started doing this, I didn't have a butcher shop and a full walk-in, so I rent space at walk-ins when I was slaughtering meat for people across the Pacific Northwest and other regions. And when I would come to deliver the pigs to the walk-in, I had to watch the butcher because, he would inevitably come out and help me unload. But I had to keep my eye on him because he felt he was helping me out when he would reach for the leaf fat, which is what this internal body fat is, and just remove it, throw it away. He's doing me a favor. And I remember one time, the butcher did this, and I was delivering this pig, we were hanging it off a back loading dock, and when the pig is freshly killed, it's actually a little easier to pull the fat off in one sheet. And so he just grabbed it, and he threw it towards the dumpster. And I dove. And I caught the fat. And I told Rob to never touch my pigs again. Because this is the most precious fat on the pig. This is the purest fat on the pig. It's called the leaf fat or the kidney fat. We call it leaf because it comes off in one big leaf. And the kidney is in here still. This is the purest fat on the pig, which means it's the highest concentration of fat. So if you render it, which is to say just to melt it, you're just melting it, not really cooking it per se, we're just melting it, then you have the highest yield of lard. So leaf fat makes leaf lard. And leaf lard is the original shortener. So Crisco hydrogenated vegetable oils are all bastard imposter fats. They're terrible. This is a fat that you can eat unreprovedly in mega quantities and have no problems.
Why did you not remove the kidney yesterday?
I like to leave, that's a good question. Why not remove the kidney on slaughter day? That's a great idea, especially to cook the kidney up right on the kill day, because that's when it tastes the best, just like all the other offal. But when I eviscerate the pig, as I'm pulling the guts out, if you go to dig in to get the kidneys out, you're going to remove some leaf fat, and they'll end up in the gut bucket. Now, and you could miss it, So if as you're eviscerating you leave the kidneys in, then you leave most of the leaf fat in there. All of it. You leave it all in there. So you get a little more leaf fat on butchery day. And so when you render your leaf fat, you want to run it through a meat grinder if you got one. This is reason enough alone to get a meat grinder, just so you could render your leaf fat. Because you could chop that leaf fat up into dice and put it in your oven and melt it. You only get so much lard. But if you grind it, you'll get like 50% more lard. And that's just because you're exposing more heat to more surface area. So grind it. And then you render it, and all that means is you're melting it without a lid. Put it on the stove top in a pot with no lid, because you want water vapor to escape as the fat is rendering. And there's a very practical purpose for that. Your lard will keep. It's basically imperishable. So lard lives in our kitchen in a giant crop, and it's just always there. In ambient temperatures, we never refrigerate it. And we use it all the time because it's a mild fat. It's sweet. It doesn't have a savory flavor. That's why you should use it in all of your pie crusts and all of your baking. It gives it the real crumble. It's so good. But leave the lid off. If you render it with the lid on, you may find that your lard tastes a little bit like pee-pee. Just not so nice. But if you leave it off, that urea, or whatever it is, evaporates. So your kitchen might smell like pee, but your lard won't taste like pee. Yeah.
Do you render do it outside? Fat separately?
Yeah, so I always keep the leaf fat separate from all the other fat that we render on the pig. And that's because it is mild. Like, it does not have a porky flavor at all. It is a totally neutral, mild fat. Whereas the back fat of this pig, all up here, the subcutaneous fat, all of that is going to be delightfully savory. It's going to have a little more flavor to it. And usually, on a healthy pig like this, the leaf fat is plenteous enough that you're going to have more lard than you could ever dream of. So that's the leaf fat. And once you get that out, then you can get out the little tenderloin, which is the blandest cut on the entire pig because it's the least used. So you can see how pale it is. It doesn't have a lot of myoglobin. It doesn't need a lot of blood because it's just never used. It's like baby food. It can just be chewed effortlessly, even served raw, like a carpaccio. We've got a little more leaf fat in here. And if you're going to eat pork raw, you know, there's really no danger to that, especially after you cure it. It was only a problem when they were feeding, again, all the problems, all of the draconian warnings that you hear about processing your own meat come from, there we go, hello. In the middle of a really good clause. There we go. All of the draconian warnings that you hear about meat, like botulism, trichinosis, and all this stuff, that's all a product of the recklessness of the industrial scale. And with the home scale, it is so much simpler. So what they were doing was feeding the waste, the viscera from the slaughterhouse floor to the pigs, which pigs will eat, being scavengers, they'll do it, right? But when you feed raw muscle tissue that started to decompose to pigs, that's how it's possible for them to contract trichinosis. It doesn't come any other way. They have to eat the raw muscle tissue of another dead animal. And it is kind of a decomposition worm. It's a parasite. And so they'll eat that. And then if you eat their flesh cooked to, you know, less than 137 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's not 160, way overkill, 137, then it's possible that you could get trichinosis. So unless you're feeding your pigs raw meat, you're probably not going to have it, which is why the cottages typically had boilers in the backyard. You'd boil all the meat scraps before you give it to the pigs. So you can feed your pigs meat in moderation. It's just a good idea to cook it first. Then you can freely eat their flesh as a carpaccio or even a tartare. All right, so now we're going to start breaking this down into quarters. This is how I quarter every four-legged beast. We're going to take off the back leg. We're going to separate the flat middle part, known as the belly, and then the spine, which we call the loin, and then very creatively the front shoulder, which is called the shoulder. And that's the four quarters. And the most pertinent thing about them is their function, what they do in a living pig, because that's how you know how to cook them. So you know the front shoulder, right? Used constantly. Every step the pig takes. That's where all of its musculature is for the rooting. Incredibly tough. And just when you see it, you'll notice it is also very fatty. So we call this the shoulder, but really it's the brazier and the roaster. That's what the shoulder is. You go to the back leg. This is used all the time, every step the pig takes. When you cut into it, you'll see it's relatively lean. So it's lean and tough. The shoulder is tough, fat, right? But the lean and tough back leg is kind of tricky. Lean and tough is a difficult thing to cook well. You've all experienced this if you buy the more affordable steaks at the grocery store from the beef, right? The round steaks, top round, bottom round, silver side, London broil, top set. They have a million names for them because they're not inspiring, they're difficult to cook. They're all tough, they're all lean. So that's tricky to cook. That's the back quarter. That's what the back leg is. And so humans, in their admirable ingenuity, have invented a thing called ham to deal with the tough and the lean. It's brilliant, the photography. And then you've got this muscle along the loin. How often does any four-legged beast use this long muscle along the spine? It's like never, right? We use them all the time because we're pulling ourselves erect, so they're flexors. So you probably can't pan fry our chops. But on a four-legged beast, they're pan friable. They're tender because they're seldom used. So these are all your pan fryers. And that's basically how we break down the pig. In the middle, the belly, which we'll keep for bacon, the belly itself is tough and fatty like the shoulder. So it's a roaster and a brazier. And even if when you go to wrap your pig for the freezer, it's probably more beneficial and more true to label things as brazier, pan fryer, roaster. Because that's the purpose of all of this. All right, so where do we quarter it? So to separate these braziers, from the roasters, from the pan fryers, to separate the leg from the loin and the belly. We're going to follow the spine, and there's a crook in the spine. You'll see where the spine stops and it takes an angle. And that angle happens right on a disc. The vertebrae are connected by discs. So we're going to go one vertebra in the direction of the head, and we can cut halfway into the spine. Not all the way through, but halfway. We can actually cut into the disc. And that's going to be where we separate the back leg from everything else. And the reason we picked this location is not arbitrary, is because that is where the pelvis ends. You just can't see the pelvis. So you have to know that it is one vertebra from the crook in the spine in the direction of the head. That's where the pelvis ends, under the meat. That is the same on all four-legged beasts, all of them. Anything you butcher, that's where you can separate the back border. It's probably not going to work on your kangaroos, your raccoons, and your bears, because they go bipedal, so they have a different pelvic orientation. So now I've cut all the meat out of the way, so you can just hyperextend it. Now I've got the leg. And then if we come to the front, I'm actually going to count, where are we from? I'm going to count 4 ribs. And in between the 4th and the 5th rib, we're going to make the mark. And the reason we picked that is because you can't see it, but that's where the shoulder blade ends. And again, the pelvis and the shoulder blade, those are part of that heavy use, constant use, therefore tough musculature. So we're just keeping the pelvis out of the tender area and the shoulder blade out of the tender area along the spine. That's why we picked those locations. Now, beef cow, because they're a little more mature when we slaughter them, like this pig is, 8 or 9 months, I think. It's a baby. All of the pork we eat is adolescent. Whereas cows, they're going to be more like 2, hopefully 3, or 15 years old. And their shoulder blades, as a result, the soft bone is ossified, so it's longer. All of that to say, if you're going to do it on a ruminant, it's in between the 5th and the 6th rib, not the 4th and the 5th. All right, so now that I've cut through the little bit of spine there, I'm just trying to keep a nice straight line so we have minimal meat flaps, and we're just going to separate the shoulder from the loin. So that should look familiar now, right? You can see pork chop and bacon. So traditionally, on the homestead, everything was cut for preservation. So we're basically done on the homestead. This, we would lift out the bone structure and bone out the Boston butt, and that would be cured for shoulder bacon, and the rest would be sausage. The back leg, take out the pelvis, boom, it's ham, the whole thing, cured for ham. And then this part, where we have the loin and the belly, believe it or not, they called it the middle, pork middles. And it would be left like this. They would just take out the spine and you cure the whole thing. It's beautiful. And then you would cold smoke it, which is to say not cook it. After the curing process, you're just painting it with a patina of flavorsome smoke. That's all it is. And then it hangs in the rafters of your house. And when you want to cook it, you cut off one rib square, which is where a rasher comes from, one rasher of bacon. And bacon has so much more application than just that thin, crispy meat that we tend to eat for breakfast. That's one tiny version of bacon's many functions in your kitchen. And we'll talk about that when we cure it. To make more standard cuts, we would have the loin, where all our chops come from, and then the belly. Technically, the word bacon was understood as the yield of the pig. Like, that's synonymous with the way we use pork today. They would say bacon. The entire pig is bacon. Because even etymologically, bacon means back. And it's a very English word, as opposed to all the other terms for cured meat, which we tend to import from Italy, right? You got the prosciutto, the pancetta, pancetta, all the etas and the etas. And then you have bacon, which means back. That's an old English word. And if you think about a four-legged beast, there's a lot of mass there that you could qualify as the back. right, of the pig. So the whole sides frequently would be cured. They would just take out the spine and everything would still be there and the whole thing would be cured. It's beautiful. All right, so make some room on the table. We've got this beautiful belly here. So this is all the belly bacon, or the streaky bacon, as it was called. It has the ribs, the spare ribs in it. I'm gonna sort of like, actually exactly like filleting a fish. I'm gonna run my knife right up against the ribs, pushing them down on my knife rather than lifting them up. And I'm gonna remove this whole little rack of spare ribs. And I don't like to peel the spare ribs or chop off any of this stuff. Leave that membrane on there. It's flavor. It's delicious. It'll hold all this beautiful fat on. This is low and slow. This is the brazier. And if you want to barbecue them, we tend to wrap them in foil, which brazes them, right? You're just locking in all of that fat, and as it melts, it becomes the braising liquid for the spare ribs. All right, so here's the belly. We're going to set this aside and bring it out later when we start to cure things. And then we've got the loin. So the loin is also traditionally cured into bacon. In Britain to this day, you can find the loin cured. It's called back bacon, and it's delicious. I'll show you just really quickly how you can make some chops. I like to take out the last rib. It makes chopping easier because we like to have etymologically accurate chops. So usually chops are done on a saw, in which case they are misnamed. They should be called saws. If you want to make chops, you're going to have to get a chopping tool, and that's what a cleaver is. And what you really want for your cleaver is a heavy item. You know, the new ones tend to be stainless and very thin and little and lightweight, and those are super dangerous because that means you have to start at a distance and get like a running start, and you have to come down with all your power, which is exactly how you're going to miss every single time. But if you have a heavy cleaver that weighs almost 3 pounds, then it's very easy because you can simply drop it. You know, I don't need to do a bunch of power, I can just drop it. And if you drop it, you're not going to miss. And so we get a beautiful loin roast here with a lovely coloring of fat, covering of fat. And this is gorgeous, beautiful, happy pork. This is also what your homestead pig is going to look like. When you scald and scrape, you're going to have, you know, an inch, at least an inch and 3/4 of back fat under the skin. And this is the very special fat. So I know I already said that about the leaf fat, but this is also very special. When you skin a pig, you'll see there's no seam between skin and fat here. Like I can't shove my finger in there like you could on a rabbit or a deer or a lamb or a cow. There's a seam. It's like the hide is like a giant wet sock that you pull off on a seam. Not so with the pig. This is skin. This is skin. And so when you skin a pig, your knife, as most things do, will tend to follow the path of least resistance, which is going to be, I don't know if you can see it where you're sitting, but it's going to be inside the fat. There's actually another seam here. And the fat, there we go, I can almost separate it with my thumb. You see that seam. The fat that is from the skin to that seam, that's the back fat. That's the most solid fat on the pig. That's where your knife falls. So you tend, and then the fat underneath that is very soft. So your knife tends to gouge into that too. And so you remove almost all the back fat when you skin a pig. Unless you are incredibly skilled at skinning them, which is very difficult. Difficult to do well. I don't consider skinning like the easy option, especially if you want to maximize your fat yield. So that's part of the reason. Because the thing about this fat is that that is the fat that must be in all sausage. So this fat is dense, which makes it very unique. When you put it in a meat grinder, it is not going to be smeared or mushed or partly rendered. it's going to be chopped. So the meat grinder actually chops it. So you have chunks of fat in the sausage, which is one of the requirements for sausage to be sausage, is that it has chunks of pork back fat in it. That's really what makes sausage delicious and keeps it moist and tasty. Very beautiful pork. So when you want to make chops and you want to put it to the highest and best use, you know, you've got, again, this huge cap of back fat. Now you can definitely leave that on each chop if you want to. That would be a very luxurious chop. You know, that's like one chop for 3 people. There's a lot there. And if you want to utilize the fat for different purposes, I'll show you how to remove it. But you'll see what we're doing here is creating, forgot to even mention this, zero trim, zero waste. There's no reason that you should have a pile of scraps and shreds and shards and ribbons of meat and one perfectly denuded, like geometrical protein unit. That's what modern butchery does. So you can totally ignore the poster of the cuts in the butcher shop. That is not your end. Forget about that. That is useless. The way to butcher pigs conventionally, like for the grocery store, that does not serve your kitchen at all. That is the retail form. The point of that is to make money. The point of that way of butchery. It's not so that it can be braised and fried and roast. So you are the authority on this. How do you cut this to fit your pot, your pans, and your ovens? That is the only goal. I'm not dumbing it down for you. That is the actual reality of the situation. The conventional cuts are useless and insipid and dry, and they don't taste that great. So to that end, we're not going to create any trim, which means when we butcher this pig, by the time we're done, the yield is 100%, which is totally unheard of. When you take your pig to a butcher or you have someone else do it, you're getting back maybe 50%. They're trimming half the carcass. And to be honest, it's kind of our fault. We're like, we don't want the fat anymore. We don't want the skin. We don't want the bones. And so that's all the stuff that they throw away. But if you lose that, then you lose your ability to cure meat traditionally. You lose all the salubrious fat, and you lose all the stock, all the broth. Pork bones make excellent broth. And so just harvesting it on your own unlocks most of the yield of the pig. So to that end, if we're going to trim off fat, we're going to do it artfully and in very useful sheets. So I made a little shoulder roast here, loin roast, that is actually a little thinner than my knife. That way I can run my knife all the way along the back fat and I get one perfect homogeneous sheet of back fat off of there. This is now not a random piece of trim that we have to figure out what to do with. This is lardo, this is salo, this is salona. This is back fat that we can cure right now. It's ready to go. Or you can wrap it and freeze it and bring it out later when you need to put it on, mix it with your venison sausage. Because one thing that all creatures need that are not pigs is the back fat of pigs. So if you're making beef sausage or lamb sausage or venison, elk, whatever, they all need the back fat of the pig. So now I've got this beautiful little rib roast, and if we're going to turn it into chops, I just run my knife in between each rib, because I don't have the saw mechanism here, and I don't even have it in my shop, which means that your rib chops are going to change in thickness as you go. Some are going to be thicker than others. That's okay. The pig is going to decide how thick our chops are. So when customers tell me, like, I want my chops to be 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch, actually, I just say, okay. I don't really actually. But really, they're going to change as you go down the line, as you're just dodging the ribs, keeping one rib on each rib chop. But they're beautiful, you know. You've got all this extra fat in there. This is a shoulder end chop, which I think is the best, where most of the flavor is. And when this pig gets a little more solid after chilling, you know, if you chill your pig for a night and a day maybe, this chop will have enough structure that you can start it on your skillet like this, balancing on its fat cap on a dry skillet. And you just let it on medium-low heat render all that fat. Now the oil in the pan is the back fat. And after maybe 15 minutes of that, you just tip it over. And then it'll sear on both sides in its own fat, and then a little bit of salt. So the only ingredients in the perfect pork chop are salt and pork. And that's all you need. It's ridiculously delicious because this meat is effortlessly tasty. You don't have to torture flavor out of this. It's there. It's already there. You just have to not burn it to a crisp. Even then, it might taste all right. Like, that's how good this is. Whereas when you feed pigs poorly and you select them for genetics that are so lean that they are more prone to heart attacks, and you raise them in an industrial setting, and then you harvest them poorly and artlessly, yeah, you've got to have a complex recipe for that pork to even taste like anything. This is why pork has a bad reputation, right? But if you simply raise your pig well, feed it well, and kill it well, it's effortlessly delicious. All you need is salt. And all you need to know how to do is braise pan frying. And it will be the best meat you've ever eaten. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Better than anything you can purchase. Alright, so I'm going to keep putting meat in here because I just realized I actually have a second side to butcher. So, do the same thing on that side. So for the back leg, I'm going to prepare this like I would a back leg for some roasting hams. We've got very clear divisions here. Trotter, hock, this is the ham proper, and then you can see this little H-bone, or they call it the H-bone, the pelvis. Everything up here is the rump, or the sirloin. Sirloin, ham, hock, trotter. And you can definitely get out the saw and saw these joints. I think it's kind of fun to joint them. If you find the heel and you go about 2.5, 3 inches down, there is a joint there. And you hang the trotter off the edge of the table, applying downward pressure, you will see the ligaments stretch. And then just with the tip of your knife, you just nick those ligaments. And then you don't have to deal with sawbone dust, and it's just makes a beautiful little trotter. So this right here is a prime cut. This is called a pig foot, or a trotter. Absolutely delicious. You can see it's got all this beautiful synovial fluid in there, which goes straight to your joints when you eat pig trotters. It's really good for you. It has no meat. There's no muscle tissue on this. It's all skin and collagen. So it is super tough, right? Because a healthy pig walks on his tiptoes. Your pig has a problem if he's flat-footed. You know, something's wrong. They're always on point like this, so it's bearing all that weight effortlessly, so it's very tough. All those connective tissues are very tough, so it must be braised. This is the braise right here. And it's absolutely delicious. This is one of our favorite meals. And you get 4 per pig. It's awesome. And so what you do is just get a pot with some water and some aromatic vegetables, right? Just carrots, onions, and celery, or peppers. And you simmer that trotter for like an hour and a half. No rolling boils, just a nice little simmer. And the trotter, you'll see it'll start to warp. And before it completely disintegrates and falls apart, after about an hour and a half, hour 40 minutes, stop the simmer. So it'll still look like a foot, because it's cool to eat feet. And then you can split it right down the middle, because everything will be tender, it's easy to split. And then you just blast them in a hot oven to crisp up the skin, or maybe on a hot barbecue to give it grill marks, or fry it in a pan with hot oil, and like wear a face mask. And it'll crisp it up, so you have this crispy braised meat. And then you could reduce a little soy sauce with some honey in a pot, throw in some garlic and ginger, and you have a teriyaki thing going on. And it's just this sticky, wonderful mess. It is so delicious. And you're just gnawing off all of the collagen and the skin. That's what you're eating. There's no meat. It's all connective tissue. And even without the teriyaki, your teeth will stick together. That's how much collagen's in there. It'll be sticky. Your face will be sticky. And it's naturally sweet and savory. It's so good. It's the collagen, it's the tendon. That's where flavor is. The lean muscle meat is bland by comparison. That's where flavor is. So good. And the back hock is kind of similar because it's also heavily used by the pig. So it's very tough. It's another brazier. And this is where we get into brining. You can joint that too at the knee joint. That's a ham hock. And you see, because yesterday we made our incisions, we made them in the trotter, we don't have a hole right here. That's where that hole would be for hanging the pig from the Achilles. We don't have that, so this can go straight in the brine. Brines are a big part of our kitchen economy. And what is a brine? A brine is just salt dissolved in water. And I like to make kind of a strong brine. I consider it a storage brine. It just lives in the fridge. Because here's the thing about the freezer, is we need to freeze our meat only because we lack the knowledge of how to preserve it without the freezer. Because the freezer doesn't preserve your meat. Actually just slows down its degradation into blandness. Whereas fresh meat is so easy to cook, it's so delicious. Frozen meat is hard, it takes a little more effort. Your frozen meat from your own pig that you kill and cut is still going to be orders of magnitude more delicious than any meat you can buy. So just know that. But the freezer is a great way to achieve freezer avoidance. You can use your brine to avoid the freezer. I think I said that wrong. The brine is your key to freezer avoidance. And so what I do is I dissolve. For my brine recipe, I use 5-gallon totes like this, buckets. Food grade 5-gallon buckets work. In a pot on your stove, just boil 14 quarts of water and then put 4.5 pounds of salt in there. And if you want to, 4.5 pounds of sugar, or sugar and molasses or something. You don't have to do the sugar, it is nice. And stir it up so that all of those, the salt and the sugar dissolve, and then you refrigerate that brine. And when it is totally refrigerator chilled, then you can start putting your ham in there, and your hocks, and your chops, and anything. There's no part of the pig you should not put in the brine. Yes?
Do you use a specific salt?
Do I use a specific salt? It's easier to say that I don't use like 3 salts, because they all work. They all work. So natural sea salt is what I use for everything. Redmond salt is great. I happen to have that today. That works beautifully. The only salt I don't use, it's a very short list. I don't use any curing salts that have the nitrite or the nitrate mixed in there. Just a couple of ham roasts. And I don't use the kosher, Morton's kosher salt, because it doesn't taste nice. It's just pure sodium chloride. It's actually a very salty salt. It's crazy salty. And that flake structure makes it really easy to oversalt things, which we're going to talk about like right now. When it comes to curing things, you'll find that the easiest thing to do is to oversalt. That's the easiest. So it's nice to have a salt like Redmond's or a natural salt that has some other minerals besides pure lab isolated sodium chloride that will dilute the saltiness a little bit, have better flavor. So all that to say, I don't use Merton's flake salt. I don't use table salt because it has magnesium stearate in it as an anti-caking agent, which is kind of gross. But everything else works. Everything else. No, I don't use iodized salt. That's the other one. You don't want it to taste marine. You don't want that flavor, fishy bacon. All right, so what we have left here is the sirloin. This happens to have, when you go to make your own pig, or harvest your own pig, and you want to make your own sausage, you need the primary ingredients of a delicious sausage. And this is like the basic ingredients that will work for pate, like a loaf pate, like a meatloaf, and anything that you do with ground pork. You're going to want at least 30% fat. And then you're going to want lovely, fresh, home-raised muscle tissue. And then you're going to want to grind all of that and salt it at 1.8% by weight. Or if you're like me, 2% by weight. And if you do 2%, it's a little more salt, but that also, so 2% happens to be what tastes beautiful, tastes perfectly. We're not used to that high of a salt level, but you can get used to it. You can adjust to it. It also happens to be the exact quantity of salt that you would apply to preserve meat. 2% salt by weight tastes great and preserves the meat, come to find out. So it's a good ratio to remember. So if you do nothing but take this piece of meat, this sirloin, or the shoulder, because they both have at least 30% back fat, and you remove the bones, and then you grind that fat and meat, and then you salt it 2% by weight, that will be the best sausage you've ever tasted. If it's a pig you have raised and harvested, I guarantee it. Because you have the elements of good sausage. Most sausage that you buy has lots of chemical binders, and it lacks the quality and the flavor, specifically in the quality of the fat. It's just not a sweet fat. It's a little bitter. And whereas the sausage that you make that way will be absolutely delicious. And any spices or herbs you put in there will just be icing on the cake. They're just for fun. We frequently make sausage with only salt. Salt, 30% fat, and then the lean meat, and it's delicious. All right, we've got the front shoulder now, and in the U.S. at least, this part, which is where the back is, the head was right here, from the spine up, this is the Boston butt. And then from the spine down, we tend to call this the picnic shoulder, and then we've got the hock and the trotter again. And to remove this trotter, if you fully bend it, you'll see there's two primary articulation points where it bends, two joints. If you go right in between them, that will be where there is a very convenient metacarpal joint. And then I'll hang it off the table. It's the same thing. Apply pressure, and just with the tip of your knife, nick the tendons. And you're not on the right spot if you ever find yourself having to use force with your knife. This is why it's really important to learn how to sharpen your knives, because if your knife is very sharp, you will never find yourself bearing down on things. Whereas even soft meat and fat with a dull knife, it will feel like bone, right? But with a sharp knife, bone is very obvious. You're just slipping through the meat, and then the knife stops on the bone. And so if you ever find yourself cutting meat and you're doing this and the veins are popping out on your forehead and you're doing a lot of sawing, you have a dull knife. You have a dull knife. I don't care if it cuts paper or shaves arm hair or skins your fingernail, your knife is quite dull. And I would recommend to you a resource for how to sharpen knives. It's a very simple resource. It's old and kind of funny, but it is a video that is free on the YouTubes by a guy named Murray Carter, and he made it many years ago, and it's 2 hours and 40 minutes long. It's Carter Cutlery Blade Sharpening Fundamentals. It used to be a DVD back before those went extinct, and I would bring DVDs and I would sell them at these events because that video changed my life. Have a sharp knife, it's everything. And it's Carter Cutlery Blade Sharpening Fundamentals on YouTube. Make a pot of coffee. It's a little boring. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes long, but you just need to watch it once, then you get it, because it is simple. It's just a little bit of time spent in advance of butchery. So you notice I do not have a steel, I'm not whacking it on a steel. That's kind of like the Western package of butchering meat, and it involves stainless steel knives and diamond steels. The knives are kind of disposable. They're not that sharp, but what they do have, because of the diamond steel, is little teeth. And so you get like 4 really good strokes, because those teeth are ripping through the meat pretty efficiently, but then those teeth have no structure, so they dull real quick. That's okay, you got your diamond steel, so you just whack it on there again, and you get 5 more good strokes, right? And at that rate, you go through knives pretty quick, because that steel is not honing the blade, it's removing a lot of steel. That diamond steel, it's removing a lot of steel. And and you're definitely getting heavy metal into the meat. So if you ever whack it the knife on a diamond steel, take a clean white cloth and wipe off the blade, look at it, you will have metal particles in there. So with this method that I follow, it's more of a Japanese approach, and it is emphasizing actual real sharpness in the blade rather than durability. And so I use water stones to do all of my sharpening, Japanese water stones, and it's all done in advance. You know, I just brought 2 knives with me this weekend, and I just honed them up a little bit this morning on my stones. And they'll last me through several pigs, and they're much, much sharper.
What do you use for your knives?
So the knives that I buy these days, you can get them at antique stores. Those are great sources, but the main thing that I look for is carbon steel, which is obvious by the patina on the blade. There'll be staining, right, as opposed to stainless steel, which is what this table is made out of. There's no staining. So they'll have a patina, they'll have some color on them. And then I look for knives that have a thin spine. So this is the spine of the knife back here, basically the thickness of the blade, spine. If that is really thick, you have a lot of grinding to do, many hours. So if I see a knife that's kind of thin, and it's carbon steel as opposed to stainless, I grab it. And you'll see them in antique stores. There's even someone storing lovely looking axes over here. I don't know if he's got any blades, but those knives are great because at the end of the day, sharpness is a very simple thing. It's acuteness. It's not obtuse. That's all it is. It's an acute blade. And the thing about carbon steel is that it can take a very acute edge because it's more dense. And it's also a little, I think it's easier to sharpen. Now you can't open a paint can with it. It will snap, it's brittle. But that's what I prefer knives for cutting. And that's what I use for everything. So, actually answer the question. The knives I'm using right now are Masahiro, and they're Japanese. And they are, you can find them on Amazon, like I said yesterday. This is the Masahiro Rose knife. And yeah, I need to set up an Amazon store or something. So I'm selling them. But they're great. They're chisel edged, so they're half the work to sharpen. It's awesome. When you have 2 bevels, that's a little more work. But just 1 bevel to work on, especially after you watch that video, you'll see why that is. It's a much simpler proposition. All right, so we've got a beautiful Boston butt here, sort of huge. I'm going to put it down there so we can get out the other side and keep going. And we'll butcher this other side really with a view towards curing. And this, we have a pork picnic shoulder. And I just cut them in half. We've got the rib cage on there still, a little bit of the brisket. Again, really fatty, also really tough. So this is a brazier and a slow roaster. And I forgot to mention the main thing is that reason number 8,251 to scald and scrape a pig is the presence of the skin on the Boston butt. So you have this huge, fatty, and tough piece of meat that needs to be braised or slow roasted. And if we slow roast it, it is never going to dry out. So this is the kind of thing that you put in your oven for, at 300 degrees for 3 hours, and then you accidentally forget about it, and it's in there for 4 more hours. No problem. Because it's got all this fat. It's just going to keep melting it and braising that tough meat and making it tender. And then the last 40 minutes or so, maybe 35 minutes, you whack up the heat to 425. And if you score the skin like this, it will crisp. And you will get a phenomenon called crackling, which is one of the most wonderful things in the cosmos. It is so delicious. And the skin will crisp, it'll be like chips. And so everybody will get some crispy pig skin, and then some just melt in your mouth, fall apart tender Boston butt. Really delicious. So that's probably one of the main reasons that we leave the skin on the pig, just for their crafting. And you leave it on all of the cuts that you know you're going to roast, because that you can get crafting on them. The chops, maybe take it off the chops, because those are hot and fast. They cook so quickly that the skin doesn't have time to crisp, usually on chops. So usually you take it off of those. The boss is right down here. And the pig. All right. Where that muscle comes from, not like necessarily always the recipe of the dry cure. So I'm going to show you kind of a mother recipe that you can follow that will enable you to cure your breakfast bacon, your jowl bacon, your lardo or salo, your cure back fat, your copa, whatever other cures, whole muscle cures that you like, this method will work for. The one distinction is the ham. We did a little differently. And that's because if you think about it, the ham is thick. It's about this thick. And it's all lean meat, so it's got a lot of water in it. That's why we did a good quantity of salt. It takes a little more salt. But the rest of all the whole muscles on the pig, they all have these two same traits. They're all not as thick as that, and they're all not as lean as that. So they're all about, anywhere from 1.5 inches to 4 inches thick, laced with fat. And that's the shoulder, that's the belly, that's the jowl, that's the loin. Even right here, if I were to take the bone out here, we could cure it the same way. So with all those meats that are about 1.5 inches to 4 inches in thickness, with a nice distribution of meat and fat, they can all be cured with the method I'm about to show you. Cured until the apocalypse. Or you eat it, whichever comes first. So and this will preserve them, but also prevent them from being too salty. And so to start, I have my bacon cure here. I call it all bacon. And all this is fine sea salt and demerara sugar at a ratio of 60-40. So 60 fine sea salt, 40% demerara sugar. And this particular method works with fine salt. You could use coarse ground salt too, but because of the way we're going to apply it, as you'll see, the fine salt is what you want for this particular method. And then you could put whatever else you want to in here. You could put herbs in it. You could put oregano and marjoram. You could put, you could whiz up some cloves and put them in there. In this case, they have juniper berries. We have these little juniper berry trees everywhere, at least in Oklahoma, that people call cedar, but they actually have beautiful, it's juniper. They have beautiful, bright, incredibly flavorful berries on. So you can pull those off, and they're little flower buds, and let them dry for a little bit, whiz them up and add them to your bacon cure, and it's unmistakable. It'll smell like gin. It's really delicious. So I've got my 60-40 salt to sugar. That's the main thing. And the sugar serves a couple purposes. The sugar is tasty, and it dilutes the salt. Because the easiest thing in the world is to oversalt your bacon. That's the easiest thing to do. It's actually kind of difficult to make it spoil. Like, don't worry about that. Again, you're going to know if it spoils. It's not going to be a guessing game. You're going to know. But to the end of salting it properly, the easiest thing to do is oversalt. So I'm going to pop this in here, just dump it all in the solid tub. And then I'm going to take meat I intend to cure. In this case, we're going to do them all in the same tub, because like I said, this is kind of a mother recipe. And I'm going to go over the meat and do what we did with the ham. Just kind of find any flaps, anything that could conceivably fold over and trap water. Even any bits that are like a concentrated bit of blood, you would want to skim that bit off. There you go. And any of this stuff, all of that, just remove the skin and it goes to sausage. All right, that looks pretty good. And then I need this to fit flat in the curing tub, so I'm going to cut it in half. So it's not curling up on the sides or anything. We're going to do some salo. So cured back fat is a beautiful thing. And who here weighs coonies or American guinea hogs? Does anybody have those? Okay. Have you ever made salo or lardo? Yeah. That is the final cause. That is the ontological purpose of kuni kunis. Because most of their body mass is this. It's what they do. They do it really well. And it is such a shame to remove all of this. It's like, that's the point of the kuni. That's its yield. Its yield is 70% of its body mass, at least, is back fat. That's its superpowers, back fat accumulation. And one of the best ways to use it is to cure it into lardo or salo. And you will find all over, especially northern and central Europe, recipes for curing the back fat. And in fact, you will even find accounts of curing it that will, if there is a vein of lean meat in the salo or in the cured fat, then it's a failure. You need that solid fat. So good. And so all these countries, even like the Hungarians, they have salona. I don't know how to say it. I just pretend to speak these languages. And the Polish have słonina, and Ukrainians is salo, and it's all just cured solid fat. It's beautiful. And when Hitler took over Hungary, he and conscripted all the Hungarian soldiers, he took away their ration. Their ration was salona. And he changed it because, of course, he was a vegetarian, like most heads of state at that time in Europe. And he replaced it with a thing called fruit leather. And the Hungarians called it Hitler's salona. But it is cured every way you can imagine. I'm going to show you one way to cure it. But there are recipes for curing salo or salona, or the Italians call it lardo. So many recipes, including hot brining it, where you take the sheet of fat and you put it in the brine when the brine's still hot, and you let it chill in the brine. And that just pushes whatever flavors are in the brine into the fat, and it's absolutely delicious. The Italians cure the lardo in marble squares. They make these marble boxes, and they make lids that fit just inside the box, and they layer in all the lardo with their special spice mix, which is mainly salt, and then they weigh it down with marble. So it's cured every way you can imagine, and it's really delicious. It's even delicious right now. So this is just back fat. I wish you could all taste this, because this is what pork fat can taste like, which is super mild. Like, there's really not much going on. The flavor that it has, it's like the papery skins on a pistachio, or the papery skins on a hazelnut. It tastes nutty, is what I'm trying to say. It's nutty, because it's from the forest. Absolutely delicious. It's so good. And one of the ways that you can facilitate the eating of more fat, which should always be the goal, eating more pig fat, healthy pig fat, is to follow the traditions of our ancestors, because they always ate a lot of pork fat too, but they did it with strategy. They did it with art. And so like salo is really, it needs some accompaniment. It needs some black rye bread, and it needs some vodka. And then you have the triumvirate, salo, vodka, and black rye bread. And it's perfect. You'd be amazed how much salo you consume with vodka and black rye bread. And it's the same thing, like the Germans, you've got their sauerkraut, and then their fatty emulsified sausages. You can eat limitless sausage if you have sauerkraut. Because that sweet, that tanginess is a foil to the rich fat. It's a perfect harmony. Okay, so we're going to cure all of this. I've got all the flaps removed, and it's ready to be put into, this is a tub with holes. And it'll look like this. I'm going to put again, some of the cure on the bottom of the tub. I'm going to take the boneless Boston butt, or if you want to use the Italian, the colpa, and I just put it right into the salt and sugar mix, and I'm gonna cover it all, rub it on, turn it over a few times, really get it all over the coca. Full contact on all the surface area. And then when I pick it up, I've got this even coating of the salt and sugar mix. This is a sufficient quantity of salt to cure this meat forever. This is it. I'm not going to apply any more salt. Done. And it goes right into the tub. Like I said earlier, if you were to somehow surgically remove all the sugar from that or the salt from that and weigh it, it would be around 2% the weight of that piece of meat. So you can follow the 2% by weight metric if you want. Or you could just do it this way. This is a little quicker, a little simpler for me. And do the same thing with the back fat. Totally covered. The back fat has almost no water in it. You know, the lean meat is, like we said, it's about 70% water. And that's really what would spoil the meat, is the presence of that water. And so that's really what the salt is there to address, to remove and bind that water. Fat is 20%. There's like no water in fat. It's incredibly, it just keeps. And so like that back fat, we're salting it with this, mainly just to flavor it. Doesn't really need it. Yeah.
I just have a question because I watch a million YouTube videos.
Mhm.
And there was some old mountain guy who was curing stuff. And he just had these wood crates full of salt. And he would dig in, throw his meat in, and cover it. And it was like massive amounts of salt in the crate.
Yes.
You don't need that much salt, then, is what you're saying.
You don't need that much salt. He's probably doing that without refrigeration.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, so that's great. That is salt pork, right? And that works. You can preserve meat that way. Literally just bury it in salt, and it will keep forever. It just means you would not pull like a belly, for example, out of your salt box and just slice it and fry it up. It would taste like salt. It would be, your mouth would dry up. It'd be so salty. And so you would change the way you cook meat. And that is how a lot of it was cured historically. They salted the heck out of stuff. And so once a week, on Sundays, they would boil the pot and boil the bacon for that week. So if you boil salty meat, it pulls salt out of it. And it makes it more palatable. And that's actually a great remedy for oversalting, which may happen, If you do a method different than this and you just apply salt to it, which works, it's very likely that you oversalt it. And the way to tell that is just to slice up some and fry it up, taste it. If it's really salty, just soak it in water for like 30 minutes. And then try it again. And even after 30 minutes, that saltiness will have reduced. Because the osmosis and the diffusion that put the salt into the meat will now take some out. The water is unsalted, so the salt in the meat will seek a balance with the water, so it will leave the meat. And so you can remedy it that way. That's really how you cook a traditional, country ham. Because in the South, where the humidity is not trivial, and where the weather is hot, the winters are even pretty balmy, the way you deal with that is by salting and smoking the heck out of everything. And so you just change the way you prepare it. You don't expect it to be the prosciutto di Parma, the Italian prosciutto where you can carve off a thin little slice and eat it raw. That does taste kind of nice even with southern ham. But it's a lot of boiling, right? And it becomes your source of salt in all of your cooking. So that's what butter and cheese and bacon were before refrigeration. In the home kitchen, you didn't really have, a tub of salt that you season things with. You less frequently made large batches of butter and cheese and bacon, all of which are preserved. And those were the sources of your salt. So there was seldom a dish that you made for the family that didn't have some butter, cheese, and salt in it to bring out the flavor. And that's what a lot of this will function as. So this particular method of curing bacon, here's the bellies now. I'm rubbing the belly on here. So this will be bacon. See how it's got that even, perfect application? That's enough to cure this whole thing. This will result in a mild bacon. And so if the bacon hangs out for a little while, meaning it's hanging in your kitchen for maybe 2 months, it's going to be real dry. It's going to start getting hard like that ham is. And so use it a little differently. Eating bacon as breakfast meat is the smallest spectrum of how bacon can be used in the kitchen. That is one way. The more common, in fact, in my house, the way we use it more often is we cut off a thick piece and then you dice it into little cubes. And then you put that in a skillet. And you cook all the things in that, everything. You can scramble eggs in it. You braise your collard greens in it. You fry vegetables in it. Make frittatas. Like that's just pretty much the beginning of everything in our kitchen. Diced up, cured pork in a skillet. And then you could add it to a pot of beans, and it will add that amazing flavor. So to actually complete this recipe, it is a recipe. You apply it a 60-40 salt to sugar mix, and then you layer it. I tend to do skin side down, but you can do it any other way. Layer it in your holy tub. You can reuse all of this cured. There's nothing wrong with it. Yes, there's definitely going to be some meat scraps in it, but no problem. Put it nested into the solid tub. And then this goes into the walk-in, or to the refrigerator. And if you even just have a garage fridge, like these tubs, happen to know, take up one whole shelf in your garage fridge. So you have 2 free shelves. You've got room for your prosciutto and for all your bacon. And a few other things, like we got coppa and lardo in there. Put those in the fridge, and this only needs to be in there for 5 days. At the end of 5 days, you take it out, rinse it, dry it, hang it. Start eating it right away. Yeah.
Will enough moisture accumulate that you have to drain the lower tub?
Good question. No, it will not drain so much liquid from the meat that you'll have to empty the bottom tub. It'll hold it just above it. So I've never had to worry about that. And you can stack it way high, depending, as much as you can fit in there, as high as you can go. Applying salt that way, just stack it. And then after that 5-day period, just take it to your faucet again, rinse it, dry it, and hang it. And again, the culinary value comes in where you learn how to use it in your kitchen. Again, it's all about cooking. You gotta learn how to use this.
You cold smoke it after 5 days?
Yes. So if you want to cold smoke it, which I highly recommend, is you take it off the salt, rinse, dry, and hang, and let it hang for a night so that you're smoking it the next day. And that just gives it one night so there's at least no more standing water on the surface of the meat. You want the meat to be dry when it goes to the smokehouse. And it is a smokehouse, and it's not a cooking smoke. So it's a cold smoke. Technically it's warm, which they really don't like, freak out about. But it's fine. And what you want is literally a relatively sealed building, like a crappy old shed, and you hang the meat in there, up high, and then you hang the meat right here, and then you build a fire right here, just so it's indirect. And it doesn't have to be that far away. Like it can only be 6 feet away from the hanging meat. And you build the fire, and then you light it, you let it die down until you just got embers. And then you can put on, a fresh large log, and then you'll get consistent smoke, plumes of smoke from that. Shut up the smokehouse and let it smoke. And the degree of smokiness that you like on your meat will be easiest to determine by the color. So if you like a mild smoke, just wait till the fat is yellow, and that might only take 1 day smoking. If you let the fat go golden, you're going to get a little richer, brown, black. Now you have a really smoky bacon, and maybe that takes 4 days of intermittent smoking. But it's the smoking again, it's not cooking it. So I've never, tested the temperature of my smokehouses. I just don't let it get hot enough to melt fat. So I'm just trying to prevent it from dripping. It's dripping a lot. I know we're getting to the point where, maybe it's 130 degrees in there, and we might start to be cooking, meat a little bit. So I just try to keep it under the fat dripping point. And the best way to design, to manage the fire and the combustion, I think, is in a Weber barbecue. You know those simple Weber barbecues? The cheap ones, like the ones that are $100, or at least they were 5 years ago. You know? Don't put the legs on, just set them right down so they're low to the ground. And you take out the first grate, but leave the other one in there. And then just literally build a wood fire in it of firewood, oak, hickory, all of the deciduous hardwoods that we have are awesome. Pecan, excellent. Build a fire in there. And then once you see some embers have formed, put the lid on with both valves all the way open. And you will get like 4 hours of blue smoke coming out of that thing. Because that's the best smoke. In a smokehouse, when you get into the heart of it, you really want a high temperature combustion, but a low temperature smoke. And so you want blue, that's what blue smoke is, as opposed to white. So white smoke is a fire that's dying. That's like, you could smoke your bacon in white smoke for 2 weeks, and it almost won't be smoked at all. So the blue smoke is what you want. And blue smoke issues from hot embers. That's where it comes from. Cooking, you know, the green wood. Yeah.
I just want to say it's 10 minutes to the next person.
All right, we should probably stop. All right, thank you very much, everybody, for listening.